My name's Diane Jacobson. I live in San Carlos, and I'm going to read to you today from this anthology of stories, Fault Zone, Diverge. The story I'm reading today is called Skin Deep. Hunky, gorgeous, steamy, perfect. These were some of the words the regulars at the 3rd Street Starbucks used to describe their barista. But none of these words quite captured his magnificence. Eddie, beautiful Eddie, worked the weekday morning shift behind the espresso machine. A rotating schedule of employees grew immune to his charms over time as they took orders for skinny sugar-free vanilla lattes and tall Americanos. They transcribed each order in a column of codes and check marks on disposable cups before passing them to Eddie. Eddie methodically steamed milk, ground beans, and pumped flavorings, never rushing, never quite dawdling. No matter how long the line or how many cups he had to fill, he moved at the same steady pace. Few patrons minded the wait for their morning jolt. If anything, they wanted him to slow down, to bestow upon them an extra moment of anticipation. Maybe, just maybe, he'd acknowledge them, share a bit of his beauty through a small smile, a nod, even a glance. It never came. Eddie kept his eyes on his work. Despite the stream of fans, as he slipped cardboard sleeves on hot drinks and plastic straws into cold ones, he'd announce the recipients and contents in a quiet, steady voice. Nick, drip. Extra room, Ellen, mocha, no whip. Dustin, caramel macchiato. Claire, chai soy latte. He'd say, turning to the next empty cup in line. Thanks, Nick and Ellen and Dustin and Claire would say. The beautiful barista never responded. People of all ages, genders, and walks of life feasted on him, devouring him with their eyes and inserting him into their fantasies. Grandmothers, waiters, teachers, unemployed actuaries, database administrators, artists, and teenagers all felt their hearts beat a little harder and a little higher in their chests as they watched Eddie work. He lingered with them long after they left, long after their coffee drinks had passed through their bodies. He'd resurface in their sleep, behind their closed eyes during lovemaking, or as their minds wandered to pass a slow moment. One woman saw his face when she emerged from anesthesia after oral surgery. One young man, his mind meandering around Eddie, was violently brought back to El Camino Real in a newly red light by the sharp slam of his car into a minivan. People gawked and giggled and pulled down all the stops to catch Eddie's attention. But he kept his blonde, sun-kissed head bent to his work. Female and male, straight and gay, patrons covered his skin, stretched smooth over his strong jaw and straight, even nose. His form was just right, too. Lean, but not so lean that his tendons showed. Muscular, but not so muscular that he looked lumpy. Eddie was just right. Maybe he was shaped through triathlons or hours catching waves on a surfboard. Maybe he played soccer and was a sculptor. Maybe he worked construction in the afternoons and ate only organic food. Whatever kind of perfect he was in each person's mind, he inspired the same kind of internal flutters. He made them want to shed their navy suits and sales call schedules to jog along the bay, or throw down their pithy t-shirts and start up stresses to plant heirloom tomatoes. He aroused travel plans and shopping sprees. He inspired both brooding and optimism. Eddie's splendor moved people. What these customers didn't know, what they couldn't see beyond Eddie's beauty, was that he was paying close attention. He knew most of the regulars well. He knew their names and drinks, of course, but he also knew about them. He collected fragments of their conversations and behaviors between steamer blasts. He immediately noticed when one longtime regular, Peter, suddenly changed his standard order. Eddie knew the change was financially based. Peter used to be a cappuccino man until he was downsized. Now he ordered drip coffee. Eddie saw Peter lace the drab drink with half and half and sugar at the condiment station in an attempt to mimic the creamy concoction of days gone by. Once, Peter brought in 2 little kids. Eddie knew these kids were deeply loved from the way Peter rested his hands on their shoulders and knelt to look into their eyes as they spoke. Eddie overheard one of Peter's phone conversations and discovered he was on the verge of losing his house. He could hear the tremor of desperation in Peter's voice as he ordered his coffee that day. So Eddie whipped up a cappuccino and served it as drip. When Peter discovered the mistake, he looked toward Eddie, who felt the stare from beneath a lock of his hair, despite being hard at work on the next drink. Eddie smiled inside. He couldn't conjure up a job or a house payment for Peter, but maybe one nice turn of luck would bring about another, and then another. Peter wasn't the only one on the receiving end of Eddie's gifts. He followed another regular, Kendra, as she navigated the online dating scene and dissected date after date with various friends as they waited in line. Eddie cringed and grew angry as Kendra's mating adventures unfolded, each ending with one jerk after another, stealing a little of her buoyancy. Eddie would slip her an extra pump of syrup or tinker with her caffeine when she seemed unusually agitated or groggy. But she deserved more. He waited and listened. One rainy day, it all fell into place. Michael, a sweet, slightly overweight guy who always left his tips in bills, ended up in line in front of Kendra. Eddie made their drinks in tandem. Kendra, he announced, and placed Michael's drink on one end of the bar. Michael, he said, and placed Kendra's drink on the other. Kendra figured it out first and headed to the bar for Eddie's assistance in working out the mix-up. Eddie saw her coming and disappeared into the storeroom on a fictional restocking errand, leaving them to sort it out themselves. The next day, he saw Kendra and Michael smile at each other. On the third day, they chatted in line, and on the fourth, they lingered at the door. Eddie followed their relationship and let out a silent whoop one morning when they came in together holding hands. A few months later, he switched Kendra to decaf when she complained of nausea 2 days in a row. Eddie knew, even before the expectant mother, when it was time to start eating for two. Eddie was always listening closely and remembering. Customers willingly shared their coffee preferences and first names, which Eddie committed to memory. He paired this information with their snippets of conversation, and he tucked it all away in a tidy mental database. Over time, he learned last names, places of employment, and vacation destinations. Insider information on City Hall activities, gossip and scuttlebutt, and hush-hush IPO news trickled in. He observed his customers' personalities and interactions and tucked the data away for a rainy day. He'd been making a half-calf, half-Splenda extra foam latte for a hot number named Heather for almost a year. She clearly took good care of herself and always dressed in snug exercise clothing that artfully displayed her hard-earned smooth skin and cleavage. Heather frequently held court, ripping apart anyone who wasn't present. God, what is she thinking getting those tacky extensions? She'd ask a companion and move on to her next victim without waiting for an answer. It's just shameful what that little girl wears. I'm sorry, I don't care if you're 5. Leggings are not pants. What does that say about her parents? I just don't think I can let my Emma spend time over there anymore. Eddie slowly altered Heather's drink over the period of a few weeks until he was treating the bitch to full-fat, full-sugar lattes. Then he started watching for dimples to appear through her spandex. His handiwork became visible on days when she dressed in white or pale pink, but only to someone looking closely. He knew she saw it every time she got dressed. He could envision her twisting around, frowning at her ass in the front of a full-length mirror. The vision filled him with warmth, as though he'd stepped from an air-conditioned building into the sunshine. Heather wasn't the only coffee drinker who landed on Eddie's shit list. Frank, a jerk with a penchant for massive ice mochas and droopy pants, rubbed him the wrong way, even before he set foot in Starbucks. One morning, a high-pitched bark drew Eddie's attention to the window. He couldn't see the dog, but he saw Frank pull open the door with a mobile phone pressed to his ear. Sorry, dude, what were you saying? I lost you for a second when a freaking yap dog got under my foot. Eddie stiffed him on chocolate and gave him decaf that first day, hoping never to see the guy again. But Frank became a regular asshole. He took cuts by ordering over the pastry case. Whenever he was in line behind an attractive female, he closed the gap until he was almost pressed against her back. Age didn't matter. Eddie had seen him brush up against a girl still wearing a training bra. Frank crumpled napkins, shot garbage bin baskets, and left every missed shot on the floor. He clogged the unisex bathroom toilet on more than one occasion. And not once, not one single time, did Eddie see an admiring look from Frank coming his way. Unfortunately for Frank, his job as a gas line inspector required a large lanyard and badge that Eddie noted and remembered. Also, unfortunately for Frank, Eddie managed to get his hands on some methamphetamine. Eddie knew exactly which ice mocha would be Frank's last for 5 to 10 years. An anonymous tip about a meth head inspector brought all hell down on Frank, whose spotty performance reviews encouraged his employer to follow up the call with a random drug test. The test came out positive, and Frank was turned over to local law enforcement. When Eddie heard a couple of customers chatting about how scary it was that a meth addict had been inspecting major gas pipes running through town, he couldn't help but crack a smile. Yes, the beautiful barista was listening. Thank you. Take care.